In the face of an economic crisis, the Harper government has finally come forward with something, but it's hard to even describe it as a something because it's such a really large nothing. Mr. Flaherty's release of his economic update and economic statement made the quite incredible claim that the Harper government would be able to balance the budget over the next 5 years. This in the face of the independent parliamentary watchdog who said that next year we are headed for budgetary deficits due to the policies of the Harper government over the last 2 years, cutting the GST and increasing spending. Now, Mr. Harper and Mr. Flaherty are sending out a message of belt tightening, but they're not doing what every other government in the industrialized world is doing. They're not putting forward an economic stimulus package to help people keep the jobs they have, to create new jobs, and to encourage Canadians to feel confident about their economy. In fact, the message of we all have to tighten our belt and everything must be cut actually sends the wrong message about confidence in our economy. So it's a perplexing economic strategy. It only makes sense when you understand that it's not an economic strategy at all. It's a purely political strategy. Mr. Harper and Mr. Flaherty want to use largely symbolic cuts to spending at the federal level, small areas that won't make any difference at all to economic performance, to distract attention from the fact that they're unwilling to do what President-elect Barack Obama is doing in the United States, what German Chancellor Angela Merkel is doing in Germany. They simply don't want to move to put government resources into public spending and investment, and that's what's needed. So while in the south of the border we have Barack Obama essentially playing the role of a new FDR, in Canada we have Stephen Harper playing a rerun of Herbert Hoover. Dark times, grim times, no relief in sight. Meanwhile, one of the things they've targeted is fairness in elections. It's essential to our democracy to ensure that deep pockets don't get to have huge influence. And by cutting the federal support, the public support for federal political parties, which was achieved by getting the political parties to agree to give up the funding that they got from special interests. The NDP had to surrender their traditional support base from the trade union movement. The other parties gave up support they'd had from corporations, and everyone agreed to accept lower personal donations. But at $1,100 per donation, the Conservative Party has deeper pockets and a support base that has the ability to write those kinds of checks that the other parties right now simply doesn't have. Certainly in the Green Party, we have a lot of supporters, but they write smaller checks. And taking away federal support for political parties is a way of skewing the political process back towards large special interests have the larger say, big establishment political parties have a greater opportunity in election campaigns, and given the first past the post system, which deprives Greens of seats even when we have a substantial, nearly 1 million votes in the last election, the fairness around political financial support through the public system is one of the things that rebalanced that unfairness, that muted it somewhat. Taking that away is only to reinforce how unfair this system will become for Greens and other smaller parties. The essence of it, though, is I'm furious, and I'm not furious because Mr. Harper has decided to take away Green Party money. It's a direct assault on democracy, and it's done with not even a thinly veiled guise that what he really wants is to bankrupt his opposition parties. He wants to be the only party that has the capacity to call elections, and he apparently, I think, called the September 7th election that occurred on October 14th primarily to reach his goal of bankrupting his opponents. Certainly nothing changed except that taxpayers spent $300 million on an election nobody wanted. This time, Canadians may have to prepare for an election over a more fundamental issue. We have a Prime Minister who doesn't care about the country, who's not taking the steps that are needed to protect our economy, not stimulating the economy, and in fact sending a message that could damage the economy. This is the time for people who care about this country to be prepared to work together. And despite Mr. Harper's pledge that in this next session of Parliament he'd be prepared to cooperate with other parties, his attempt to destroy them makes it very, very clear that there is no willingness on the part of Mr. Harper to cooperate with anyone. There is no interest in helping Canada. This is all about achieving political partisan power by brute force. It's deeply offensive to people who care about democracy, Thank you for visiting this website. Thank you for caring about our democracy.